Let's face it, lectures have a reputation, and it's not a great one. Think blank stares, phones under desks, and a whole lot of, will this be on the exam? But here's the thing, lectures don't have to be one way. You are not Charlie Brown's teacher. Welcome to the What and Who of EDU, where we bring you insights from the leading educators, researchers, and innovators shaping the future of teaching and learning. From emerging teaching trends to real-world classroom strategies, we break it down to help you create a more impactful and effective learning experience. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone, and today we're bringing you 10 instructor-approved ways to turn passive learning into active engagement. Now, these aren't silver bullets, but they are ideas from real classrooms with students who zoned out, stressed out, and occasionally tuned out. And if you'd like to learn more about our featured educators who are giving us these amazing tips, we've added their bios in the show notes. So if you've ever felt like you're lecturing into the void, stick around. We've got stories, strategies, and tips to help you spark attention and keep it. These days, students' attention spans are shrinking faster than your office hours during midterms. And when ChatGPT is just a browser tab away, you're not just competing with TikTok, you're competing with robots. Dr. Ryan Herzog, Associate Professor of Economics at Gonzaga University, brings us tip number 1. Stop trying to out-tech the tech, and instead give students what AI can't: connection, conversation, and context.
Students' attention is narrowing, right? So right now, in terms of teaching macroeconomics, there's a ton of current content, right? You spend time, hey, let's talk about tariffs, and let's talk about why economists are so concerned about tariffs. And you want to bring in current events, and you watch videos and do all these things. And then the students are like, well, that's not in the book. The focus of students is so hyper-focused on, just tell me what I need to know for the exam. Students don't feel like they need to pay as much of attention in the classroom because they can just go to AI and they think they can get the material from AI. And we are seeing more and more of that. So, you want to try to tell fun stories and you want to try to get them to engage in the material in ways that make it seem relevant. So, how do we get being, interactive? I do a lot of iClicker questions. I do a lot of those in-class worksheets. I do a lot of group worksheets in the classroom. So breaking up some of the kind of monotonous of a lecture and getting students to work on stuff together and with each other. And that allows me to go around the room, talk to the students, engage with the students and things like that. Generally, I think helps make it more interactive, right? Have a fun story, bring in current events, show recent news stories, all those sorts of things are things we've been doing for a long time.
So it's not about beating the bot. It's about being more interesting than their notifications. No pressure, right? But Dr. Herzog's advice is solid. Bring the real world into the classroom, tell a good story, and meet students where AI can't. Somewhere around minute 16 of any lecture, students start mentally wandering into their weekend plans. So what do? Well, if you're Dr. Erica Martinez, your strategy is to slice and shuffle, which takes us to tip 2. The professor of instruction at the University of South Florida chunks her lectures into 15-minute segments. That way, she has a built-in reset button before boredom even grabs a seat.
I try to break up all of my lectures into 15, no more than 20-minute segments where I'm changing what I'm doing at the time to help re-engage the students. So I may lecture on the material and then stop to do some iClicker polling questions, or stop to do some group work, or stop to do video and ask them for feedback. There are classes where I have demonstrations and experiments, so I'll have a subset of the students come up to the front of the classroom. It just helps re-engage the students versus being stuck in the same task for 30, 40, 50 minutes at a time.
But she's not the only one putting lecture fatigue in timeout. As an early bingo bonus, we bring in Dr. Margaret Holloway, assistant professor of English and the composition coordinator at Clark Atlanta University. And she'll explain to us how she builds checkpoints right into her lecture. Think of them as mini invitations for students to rejoin the conversation.
So I do lecture, but I break my lecture up into maybe 3 different parts, especially if it's a longer lecture. So I will introduce a concept, talk about the concept, and then I'll insert a slide or something in my PowerPoint presentation and say, hey, now let's practice this or let's talk about it. So it's not just me talking for 20 minutes or so and them getting bored or checking their phones. I have those checkpoints where they are now entering into the conversation. They have to show me that they're listening. We are going to practice something, even if it's just, 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to do something related to what I just talked about. And so I do that about 2 or 3 times in my lecture to keep the class interactive, keep the students engaged and alert. And that has really worked. Now, in the past, I was against lectures because I just couldn't figure out how to get my students involved. But those checkpoints work like a charm.
Dr. Martinez slices and Dr. Holloway checkpoints. Either way, the idea is the same. Don't wait until the end to get students re-engaged. Instead, build moments for interaction right into the structure. Think of them as intellectual stretch breaks, but no yoga mats are required. If your lectures feel like you're the only one doing the driving, then it might be time to hand over the keys. Dr. Mike May, the lower division coordinator in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at St. Louis University, puts students in control. So tip 3 is to let students take the wheel.
So the way I structure my lectures is the first 10 minutes are warm-up questions, which I describe as questions of what we covered yesterday to make sure that you actually have gotten them. I will have students tell me how to proceed. And depending on the class, I will proceed however they tell me to. So when someone then says, why did you put a 5 there? My answer is, because somebody told me to put a 5 there. Do you think something else needs to go there? And I will also do math by democracy, that people have to give campaign speeches for their answer and then revote as to which is the right answer.
Yes, campaign speeches. It's part game, part group accountability, and all about making students active participants in the problem-solving process. Welcome to Math Class, Democracy Edition. From student-led debates to math by democracy, we've seen how powerful it is to hand students the mic. But sometimes, especially when working with neurodivergent learners, it's just as important to know when to slow the pace and check if everyone is still with you. That's where Dr. Kristen Monroe steps in. She's an assistant professor of chemistry at Landmark College, and she brings us tip 4, which is pace your lecture to meet your students, especially when you can't read the room. Her tool of choice? That's iClicker questions, and not just for polling, but also as a real-time gut check that tells her when to pause, rewind, or move forward.
I'm from Jersey and I talk fast and I get excited about what I teach. I've had students tell me again and again, you talk too quickly, you go through content too quickly. And so I do use iClicker questions in my classes because it helps to pace myself. I don't always know whether the students are learning the content. I can't always look out and read students' faces. And so what's nice about the iClicker questions is essentially it helps me to read the room and know, do I need to slow down? Or, oh, look, everybody got this question right. Okay, we can move on from this. And because I use a half flipped classroom method where half of the time is used for active learning, if we spend more time on the lecture and we're discussing the iClicker question results, that's actually fine because it's all about engaging the students and giving them the time with the material that they need.
Dr. Monroe's half-flip method blends just enough lecture with meaningful interaction. And those clicker questions, they're a built-in pause button that gives students time to think and instructors time to adjust. Think of them as speed bumps for pacing and not roadblocks. Sometimes engagement isn't about the what, but the how, which takes us to step 5. Jennifer Duncan, an associate professor of English at Georgia State University's Perimeter College, knows that switching up the medium can unlock student interest. And sometimes that means trading textbooks for Disney. Yes, really.
I just try to present material in multiple ways. And so sometimes that may be very scholarly, like something from Films on the Humanities or Khan Academy or something like that. But sometimes it's a YouTube video of Disney characters singing songs while they spot the rhetorical elements. So trying to find something that's going to hit a student in some way. And I love things like adaptive learning assignments or mastery-based learning assignments so that students can get their needs met without having a bunch of extra work. For online students, anytime I can teach through an interactive activity instead of through a lecture or a course reading, that's going to be a real win for me.
Because when students are analyzing Let It Go for ethos, pathos, and logos, and they realize that Disney villains are actually masters of persuasion, they're not just entertained, they're engaged. And once that happens, it's a whole new world. Some subjects demand more than explanation. They need embodiment. When you're teaching something as intricate as anatomy, words alone don't always cut it. That's why Dr. Derek Harmon treats his lectures like a stage. As an associate professor in the Department of Biomedical Education and Anatomy at The Ohio State University College of Medicine, he gets students out of their seats and into the content, literally. Which takes us to tip 6. Don't just lecture. Choreograph learning.
There's a number of ways to make this dense content of anatomy engaging to the students. And so I think it's a mixture of technology-based and interactive-based. By interaction, I mean, I try to make my lecture sessions, whether it's to 15 students or 115, as two-way interactive as I possibly can. And the benefit with anatomy is obviously it's very macro and can be a lot of movement-based discussion. I can have students in a full auditorium. All right, I want everybody to stand up. We're going to do this together. Or can I have 2 people come down and act as my role models or my demonstration here as you do a certain movement or test some type of sensory component? That is the big one.
But Dr. Harmon doesn't stop at movement. He brings that same intentionality to his slides, his labs, and even immersive tech, especially when distractions are everywhere.
One of the things I teach my grad students, when they're putting out their presentations is something as simple as animate your text bullets. Don't make all of your text pop up at the same time. As soon as I see a new slide, whatever text is on that slide, I mentally have to read everything that's there before I can start to listen to whatever the presenter is telling me. And so if you give me an entire slide of text, I can't pay attention to you. When I am immersed in a space, everything else fades away and I am only able to focus on what is presented in front of me in that virtual space. And I think that is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful features and unique features of virtual reality compared to any other medium.
Because no one ever said, wow, I feel so connected to that wall of PowerPoint text. But what if you don't have a live classroom? For tip 7, we head to the land of asynchronous learning with Betsy Langness, professor and psychology department head at Jefferson Community and Technical College. Asynchronous courses can sometimes feel like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but with no clear starting point and no narrator to guide you. But Betsy tackles that head-on with interactive ebooks that don't just deliver content, they provide context.
I think one of the main things to help make lectures, because when you're in that asynchronous environment and, just trying to give them a little tidbit or insight into what they're going to be reading in the book, and then selecting a really good ebook that is interactive, that does engage students by giving them try it questions, or that allows them to have that adaptive quizzing. So if they don't understand it, they can go back. That does have optional videos if they want to look at those, so they can get that information in a different format. I think that helps somewhat too, that goes along with those lectures.
Betsy's approach turns static reading into guided discovery, keeping students oriented, engaged, and never fully on their own. So it's still a choose your own adventure, and you still get to choose, but you're no longer guessing in the dark. Now, clear structure and smart tools do help, but without belonging, even the best designed classes can fall flat. You can have perfectly timed checkpoints and clever TikTok references, but if students don't feel like they belong, they're just less likely to engage. Dr. Charlotte Thayer-Rausch gets this, and we turn to her for tip 8. Because for the assistant professor of biology at York University, belonging isn't a nice to have, it's a need to have. And it starts from day 1.
I would say establish it immediately. What are some ways I implement this approach? Well, firstly, through diverse activities, and secondly, by involving students as part of the decision-making process. So no matter how large or small my class is, I try to assign a getting to know you introduction piece, asking students to share something they would like me to know more about. Maybe their interests, their hopes for the course. I truly enjoy learning more about who is enrolled in my class, and it also fostered conversations during student hours throughout the semester. As well, I splice in a number of in-class activities, including coloring activities. The purpose of these activities is to explain complex biochemical structures, talk about the pathways, the processes, but as an added bonus, coloring has been also shown to support wellness too. And besides embedding activities as one strategy, I also provide students with an option to vote on how we implement a lecture or flipped session. I recall students were feeling overwhelmed about the chemistry content we presented in an introduction to biology course, and asked if we could spend the last 50 minutes of lecture reviewing via like a chalk talk instead of introducing new concepts on kinetics. And as educators, striving to ensure that students are comfortable to ask for help and being able to retailor the lecture based on their opinions, I feel truly emphasizes that their voice matters. The students are really part of the learning process.
From coloring biomedical structures to giving students a say in how class time is used, Thayer-Rausch weaves connection into every corner of her classroom, because sometimes the most powerful engagement strategy isn't more content, it's more care. Once you have students on their feet, why stop there? Dr. Jennifer Ripley Stickle, a teaching professor in the Department of Biology at West Virginia University. Now, she takes movement a step further with tip 9. She doesn't just choreograph learning, she turns students into the learning itself.
I do hands-on activities and demonstrations for different concepts, the kind of games and illustrations and so forth. Like when we study mitosis or meiosis and study cell division, I have these really giant playing cards, and students will get a big giant playing card, and then I'll have 3 or 4 students up in the audience that are the directors, and they have to direct mitosis by the playing cards. So if you are the same color and the same suit, then you are a sister chromatid. You're an identical copy. But as you are the same suit but a different color, then you're homologous chromosomes. And so they will line them up in the stages of prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase and direct them to move through the classroom. It's testing the knowledge. So the directors usually talk, and the students that are shyer will just hold the card and move around, but allows them to visualize how things change during that process.
Not only that, but as it turns out, figuring out how many licks it takes to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop is the perfect way to break down independent and dependent variables.
So I'll do a lot of things like that. We do the scientific method
with Tootsie Pops. So we do how many licks does it take to get to the center? And everybody likes a Tootsie Pop. Then there's not a lot of allergens in it, so we can get away with it. And they look at confounding variables, whether the ridge on the Tootsie Roll has to be standardized, or if it's a center, is the Tootsie Roll itself in the middle? What if flavors have a difference? And then we talk about how to control and how to come up with independent and dependent variables, and everybody gets a Tootsie Pop at the end.
When students become the content, whether they're aligning chromosomes or testing variables with Tootsie Pops, they're not just hearing about science, they're enacting it. Adriana Bryant, an English instructor at Lone Star College, Kingwood in Texas, has flipped the script on lecturing, literally and figuratively. Instead of spending class time talking at students, she gives them the material ahead of time and has them bring in their questions. That way, class isn't just a review, it's an active discussion. Which brings us to tip 10. Let students lead the conversation.
When I first started out, I did a lot of lecturing in class, but I have in the last couple of semesters shifted a little bit. And what I do is I post my lectures well enough ahead of time, and my students will create questions that they have over the lectures. So then when we get to the actual day, I spend the majority of the time going over the questions that they have about the material. I also highlight many of the elements or the concepts that I feel really need to be repeated, but also this allows for me to pose questions. So pose our topics in ways that we're both being active in this conversation. So it becomes more a discussion of the topics than me just talking to them for an hour and 20 minutes, right? I love utilizing collaborative documents. So we create these class collaborative notes often over the concepts. So it creates a really good study guide for them throughout the semester, as I have a lot of comprehensive and cumulative quizzes and assessments. So they're constantly having something to refer back to, but also seeing the different perspectives of their peers.
And there you have it, 10 instructor-approved ways to turn lectures from blah to aha. Some were about movement, some were about mindset, some involved clickers, coloring, or campaign speeches. But they all shared one thing in common, and that's students learn better when they're a part of the process and not just watching it happen. So whether you're teaching asynchronously, lecturing in a giant auditorium, or somewhere in between, there's always room for a little more interaction, a little more curiosity, and a little more, wait, can we try it this way instead? A huge thanks to our featured educators for opening up their classrooms and sharing what works. You'll find their bios in the show notes if you want to learn more, follow their work, or just say thanks for the tip about the Tootsie Pops. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a colleague or that one friend who still swears PowerPoint animations are enough to count as engagement. And if you have a great way to spark engagement that we may have missed, leave us a voicemail at 512-765-4688, and you might just hear yourself on a future episode. Bonus points if it's the kind of advice that makes us laugh and learn. We'll be back soon with more real-world strategies to help you meet your students where they are and take them somewhere even better. Until next time, I'm Marissa Bluestone, and this is the What and Who of EDU.